Guy Masterson is an actor, producer, and director. His productions are among some of the most successful, both commercially and artistically, at the Edinburgh Festival. Welcome to the Written Word. I'm Mick Drain, and this is Guy Masterson.
Voiceover studio. It's a bit makeshift, but it's fine, and it creates a nice audio quality.
And how many years have you been going to Edinburgh now?
This would have been my 27th consecutive year.
Wow.
And I produced over 150 shows up there in that time, some of which are repeat shows, like Under Milk Wood, for example, as I think he's done 7 seasons up there. Sometimes one-offs in big theaters. I mean, here's the thing. I started playing a big theater with Under Milk Wood back in 2000, I think was my first time I played the music hall of Assembly, which is 680 seats. And I realized that I could cram as many people in there in one performance as I could in 6 performances in the Edinburgh Suite. So I thought, well, what's the point of doing the Edinburgh Suite? So that was a nice realization. It also made me feel, oh, well, this is a popular piece, and I can just go up and do 2 or 3 performances of that as a sort of a bonus, and that enables me to underwrite the other things I'm doing. And it also raised the profile of Under Milk Wood and Animal Farm and Shylock and me in general. You know, when you come in and you see an artist who's known for doing solo plays on a massive stage, the biggest stage in Edinburgh, selling it out, you kind of go up a notch, if you like. And that enabled me to produce other work, which was great.
Is there any particular shows that stand out in terms in your Edinburgh cycle of stuff?
Oh my God! I mean, I have been so fortunate to have worked on some of the incredible hits of Edinburgh. I mean, crikey, where do I start? I mean, my first year was Under Milk Wood in 1994, and that, God, it all sounds like one big boast, and I'm sorry about that. But
Hello.
When I first went up to Edinburgh in '94, I had played the Traverse Theatre, which is Edinburgh's sort of premier national theatre of Edinburgh, if you like, in February, and I was invited back to the Assembly Rooms, which I always thought was way beyond me, and going to Edinburgh. And because I played the Traverse in February, the show sold out before it even got to Edinburgh. So I went up to Edinburgh in my first year, '94, with a sold out show without having to even hand out a flyer. So I was spoiled rotten. And then I repeated that process the following year with Animal Farm. I went to the Traverse in January and then back to Assembly in Edinburgh. Again, the show sold out before I got up there. So then I went up to the Ballroom, which was 360 seats. The following year, I think it was 96. And I alternated. I did a repertory with Under Milk Wood and Animal Farm and sold the Ballroom out for 26 performances. So by that point, after 3 years in Edinburgh, I had kind of made my mark. I was established, and I hadn't lost money, which was remarkable. In fact, in '96, selling out a 360 seater, you can. I made a fair whack, you know, and that then started me touring internationally. But it also, and it was when I was touring internationally that I started meeting like-minded performers, brilliant solo performers, who then asked me how they could play Edinburgh. And I thought, well, I'll help you. And that's how I became what I call an accidental producer. You know, I started helping these artists and sort of saying, well, I'll present you. And, you know, so I got in touch with Assembly. I'd make the arrangements with the venue, just like I'd done for myself. And I organized the accommodation, and suddenly I was producing or presenting. Sometimes I'd be presenting using my money, and sometimes I'd be presenting using their money. Sometimes I said, look, it's an already produced show. It's not like you want me to pay for the making of the show. All I'm doing is presenting you and being proud to do it. And these guys, some of these guys started winning awards. So suddenly I was associated with award-winning shows, and that just enhanced my reputation. And some of those were fantastic. So going back to Unlimited Wood and Animal Farm obviously were big hits in Edinburgh, and are memorable to this day. But then I think the first Fringe First that came through the company was a New Zealand company that I presented, Skin Tight, and that was at the Travis. That was 1998. We'd won the Best Actress Award in 1996 for a show I directed. I got a couple of Fringe First. In those days, they nominated Fringe Firsts. Got a couple of those nominations, but I never won one. And then in I think 98 was the first one. And then they started coming thick and fast. 99 got one. In 2000, I got 3. In 2002, I got 3. And loads of stage awards and nominations and stuff like that. So it all helped. The big hit, I think, which really changed everything, but not just for me, but in some ways for the Fringe, was 12 Angry Men, because it was one of those projects which was it was thought of in the Assembly Bar over a load of pints, and myself and Owen O'Neill, a fellow Northern Ireland boy, we'd watch 12 Angry Men on the TV, I think about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were talking about it. Oh, what a great movie that is. And wasn't it a play? Yeah, it was. I think it was a play. We should do the play. So we walked around the bar, mainly with Owen's friends, comedians, lots of people like Rich Hall and Bill Bailey and Omid Jalili and Greg Proops, and and everyone said, God, I want to do that. I'll do that. I'll do that next year. We'll just do it for fun. And I said, yeah, and we'll put it on at lunchtime, and then you can have a rest, and then you can do your comedy in the evening. We'll just do it for the fun of it. And I could have cast the play 3 times. In fact, I probably did cast the play 3 times. Everyone was choosing the juror that they wanted to play. And I'm saying, you can't do that one. That's already, Rich has picked that one, and Bill's picked that one. And well, crikey, what one you can do juror number 6. Which is the smallest one, Anyway, we cast it 3 times, and but then we didn't even consider whether we could get the rights to the bloody thing. And of course, when I did finally apply for the rights, we were denied them, and we were denied them by an American company called the Roundabout Theatre Company in New York, which turns out to be the richest theatre company in the world because of all the benefactors, Broadway, all that shit. And they basically said no. Can't do it. And Owen had a brilliant literary agent by the name of Rod Hall, and Rod decided that he would get onto the Roundabout. He knew people at the Roundabout Theatre, and said, look, all they want to do is Edinburgh. Just come on, just a Fringe festival. Let them do Edinburgh. So they demurred and said, all right, they can do Edinburgh. That's fine. Do 26 performances. So I took the show up to Edinburgh with all these top comedians, and the bloody thing sold out the Assembly Hall, the Assembly Music Hall, before we'd even got up. I think the only show which wasn't sold out was the first one, which was the preview, and that sold out by the time the show went up. And the rest of the run and there was this whole sort of sense around Edinburgh, what is this? Comedians playing such a serious thing. Oh yeah, they're going to make, they're going to take the piss of that. And it was kind of all the audience sitting there with their arms folded. What's Bill Bailey going to be like, And of course the comedians took it damn seriously. And it worked. And one of the greatest moments of my life, actually, not just my theatrical life, was the reaction to the first performance. and none of us knew what the reaction was going to be. I knew it was going well. I knew it was. I was watching it, just knowing this is unbelievable. The tension in this room is incredible. And I was standing at the back of the music hall, which is very, very steep, and I was looking down at all the 680 people, and they're staring, rapt. And I didn't have time to work the curtain call with them. And dealing with comedians, it was like herding cats, believe me, trying to get them to stand still and shut the hell up. And I was trying to just work the curtain call with them, and the audience were lining up outside waiting to come in. And I said, "Okay, boys, just up. Okay, when the lights go down, you just sit there staring forward after the last line, and the lights are going to come down over you 10 seconds, and then in the blackout, I just want you to stand in the blackout and stand there, and just wait for the applause. And then the lights are going to go down, and then you come forward and take you." And so that was all I could do. Anyway, the lights went down. And the boys stood up in the blackout, and the lights came back up, and there was absolute silence. It was the longest silence I'd ever. And suddenly the audience just stood as one, whoomp, and cheered. They cheered so loudly, the place was shaking. They were stamping their feet. Bill Bailey cried. Bill was sobbing. I think they all were sobbing because we didn't have a clue how it was going to turn out. Anyway, it turned out to be a phenomenon, and it changed things. It changed things in the whole Fringe, actually. For the first time, a drama had sold out. It wasn't just a comedian or a circus. A drama had sold out the music hall for an entire run, every single day. You could not get a seat. This was with, I think there's £12 ticket prices at that time, and even that was expensive. And Assembly at the time were the only venue that had a big theatre. The Assembly Music Hall was considered the jewel in the crown of the Fringe, and so if you played at this in the music hall, you were a big operator. You were either big comedian or Whose Line Is It Anyway, TV personalities, and circus, basically big extravaganzas. But the drama. So this was a new thing, and then so we followed that up the following year with One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Bill Bailey was going to be McMurphy, the big lead. But Bill, he was nervous about playing McMurphy, and then he got another offer. He suddenly couldn't do it, and I had to recast. And I was recasting. This was after we'd committed to Edinburgh. I had the rest of the cast in place, and Josie Lawrence was going to play. Nurse Ratched, and she, because Bill dropped out, she took another offer. I think she did something at the Globe, an all-female version of All's Well That Ends Well, or As You Like It. It wasn't As You Like It. And so I lost Josie Lawrence. I lost my two leads. And so I drew up a dream list. Who did I want in the role? Think big. We're going to Edinburgh. We're likely to sell out, and then we're going to transfer directly to the West End. That was the plan. I should tell you what happened, or what didn't happen, with 12 Angry Men. We had such a huge success that suddenly every West End producer wanted it, and I was suddenly, going around meeting all these producers who, you couldn't dream of meeting, doing a one-man version of Under Milk Wood, but suddenly they all wanted it, and I settled on working with Nika Burns, who at the time was working for the Really Useful Theatre Company, and she had access to all the West End theatres, but she also had knowledge of Edinburgh, so she understood, and she also ran the Perrier Awards, so she understood comedians, she understood where I was coming from as an Edinburgh director and producer. She understood what we had achieved in Edinburgh and what we tried to do, which was just a celebration, if you like, doing it for the fun of it. And so she wanted to give us a reward by taking us into the West End. But the Roundabout Theatre Company put their foot down and just said, no, there's no way this is happening in the West End. No way. So we couldn't do that. So in the end, she said, okay, well, we can't do that. So what do you want to do? I said, well, the boys and I have been talking. We're going to do One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They're mad enough as it is. So we got the rights for that. And that's how that all started. And the plan was this time to actually come straight down into West End Theatre. So there I was in May, all, you know, tickets were on sale in Edinburgh, selling like hotcakes. No one knew who our stars were. I had Mackenzie Crook lined up as Billy Bibbit, and he had done something called The Office. And he was so perfect for Billy Bibbit. And I said, please, Mackenzie, you are so perfect for this. I want you. And because of all the other comedians, he was thrilled to join up. But we still didn't have our lead. Then I met Frances Barber. And I had seen Frances in 2 other shows and thought she was absolutely brilliant and perfect for Nurse Ratched. So I signed her up. And then Christian Slater. I drew up a dream list. And I wanted Sean Penn or Robert Downey Jr. But Christian Slater was high up on my list. And so we just got in touch with him. And Christian Slater's mother, who's his agent, Mary Jo Slater, got in touch and said, don't even approach anybody else. It's Christian's show. He wants to do it. He'll come over and meet you. And he happened to be coming over to London anyway, because he had a film premiering. So we met up and we had a good time. I introduced him to a bunch of the lads, and we decided that we would do that. And so that's what happened. And so we suddenly, the year after the 12 Angry Men, we suddenly had the next big thing, which was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, not only starring the comedians, not only that, but also starring a Hollywood superstar. And of course, this bloody thing sold out. All tickets went by June or something ridiculous like that. And we'd also had advanced sales, insane advanced sales in London. So we changed the theatre we were going. We were going to go into, I think we were going to go into the Apollo, which is something like 500. But sales were so strong, suddenly the Gielgud became available. And the Gielgud was 800 seats. And so Nika and I hum hard about this. You know, should we do this? Is this a bit of a risk? You know, coming down. It says, no, Christian Slater's in the lead role. It's not a risk. And for me, the Gielgud was special because it was the first theatre my uncle had played in the West End, when it was originally called the Lyric. That was the first West End theatre. And so, or the Globe. I think it was the Globe. It was the Globe. So I was absolutely thrilled about that. My West End debut as a director was going to be in the same theatre that my uncle had made his stage debut in the West End. But anyway, without putting too fine a point on it, I actually resigned from the show 2 weeks before we opened. I had a whole bunch of personal issues and the stress of various things happening. I felt that the best thing for me to do was to pull back, and Terry Johnson took over the show and directed it. Well, finished it off basically and did a great job. And the show went on and did 16 weeks in the West End and extended, and then came back for another 16 weeks and then did a huge tour. But anyway, the Edinburgh project had changed the way Edinburgh looked at drama, if you like. It was proof that there A was an audience there for it, and B that if you had the right product, Edinburgh could sustain big theatre, commercial theatre, if you like. Now, I wasn't trying to undermine the Fringe in any way, although I was accused of it, because initially when I thought of doing this, it was simply as a celebration, as I said. But I also wanted to find a conduit whereby there was a route for theatre to come into Edinburgh and transfer directly to the West End. And it didn't matter that the fact that this was big show, these were big shows. It could be any level show. All I wanted to do was to create a conduit. that could happen, that if you got a West End producer on board even before Edinburgh, then you had your route. You'd go to Edinburgh with a pre-West End show and then come down to London. So you could almost treat Edinburgh as I wouldn't say treat Edinburgh, you could give Edinburgh the previews, the West End previews, which would also raise the profile of the Fringe. I don't think we set out to raise the profile of the Fringe per se, but I think we were trying to say that the Edinburgh Fringe was big enough to sustain a big commercial theatre piece. So the following year, 2005, which turned out to be an even bigger year, because Assembly had opened their big theatre, which was the 900 or 800 and something seat Assembly Hall on the Mound. And, you know, everyone thought, well, how are we going to fill that? In between times, the Pleasance had opened the Pleasance Grand, which was an 800 seater, but it was literally a barn. It was a warehouse. Well, it was a sports hall, basically. It wasn't really a dedicated theatre. I think Assembly had really put their mind toward creating a proper theatre space. I'm not saying the Pleasance didn't. They did a great job. It was another big space for big comedians and big this, big that. And they were selling it out. So Assembly had an even bigger one, the Assembly Hall. So William Burdett Coutts of Assembly came to me and said, look, I'd had a hard time that year after resigning from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which turned out to be so huge. He got in touch with me and said, would I direct a big show? They would produce it. I didn't have to do any of that. All I do was direct. And I said, sure. And I put the team together again. I did end up kind of producing it. I put all the team together, the creative team together, and did my thing. And we did The Odd Couple, again with Bill Bailey and Alan Davis. It was going to be Dylan Moran, but Dylan wasn't available at the right times, so Alan stepped in, and again, the show sold out before we'd even got there, and a massive hit. But so those 3 years kind of inadvertently changed things in Edinburgh. And again, ticket prices, which I wasn't happy with, skyrocketed for the big shows. I mean, I think this was the first £20 ticket price. So in 3 years, we'd gone from 12 quid to 20 quid, which was hardly Fringe, but it's still a shitload less than you'd pay out of the Fringe, wouldn't it, for such a show? And people didn't seem to have a problem paying it. But, you know, that always sat a little hard on my shoulders, I think. And I did take some flack for that, even though I didn't set the ticket prices. You know, I remember having an argument with a dear friend, actually, who was on the Fringe board, and he said, he had a few too many red wines, and he then turned on me and said, "You've changed everything. You have ruined the Fringe." And I went, "What? I didn't mean to." I said, "No, I don't believe I did. I believe we've raised the profile of it globally." And he's going, "No, you haven't." So that was an interesting conundrum. And then my next memorable thing, well, actually, I should mention the great David Calvito and John Clancy situation, because as I'd become this inadvertent producer back in the late 90s, this mutual friend called me and said, from America, "I understand you produce theatre in Edinburgh." I said, "Well, I kind of do. I don't. Yeah, I suppose." He said, "Well, I've got this great show. You've got to come and see the show. Come out to New York, see the show. You're gonna love it. It's perfect for the Fringe." So I flew out to New York to see Americana Absurdum, and my plane was late, and they put the show on for me.
Wow!
Put the show on for me in an obscure venue in the Lower East Side. My plane was late. They didn't let us off the plane. I jumped in a cab and I got there for the last 20 minutes of the play, but I walked in and snuck to my seat in the middle of the front row. And I saw enough to know that this group was fantastic. And then afterwards, thankfully I was able to say wonderful things about it. And I had about an hour and a half before I had to get back in a taxi and get back on a plane home. But it was enough for John Clancy to ply me with dirty martinis, and it was enough for me to make the promise, yeah, we'll do this in Edinburgh. And we did. We produced it. It won Fringe First, a couple of Best Actor awards for Dave nominations, and that set David Calvito and John Clancy and co on the Edinburgh road. And since John is now, I think he's won 6 Fringe Firsts, Dave has been involved in 6 or 7 Fringe First winning shows. He's won a couple of his own. He's won Best Actor. He's been nominated 4 times. He's a Fringe stalwart now, and he's done, I think, well, that was 2000. So that would have been his 20th season. Crikey, 20th season consecutive. So that was another great thing that had happened, and some wonderful friendships there, and immense talent that was coming in through that little conduit. What else? I think 2009 was another great year. I produced a show that about Eric Morecambe. I think you were involved in that one when it came to you in Newton Abbey.
Yeah.
And Morecambe was another one of those dream projects. I'd worked with this guy in '97 on a Steve Martin play called Wasp in the Ballroom of Assembly, and he was like a mini Eric Morecambe, and he was incredibly funny. He played my son, and I said, in a decade's time, you're going to play Eric. And he would then go with his glasses. Oh yes. And we just became really close friends. And after about 5 years, he said, "When are we going to do the piece about Eric?" I said, "Oh, you're not quite there, a bit young." And 5 years later, "When are we going to do the Eric Morecambe piece?" Finally, it was 13 years, so it's 2009, and 12 years it was, and we produced it, and it was another one of those dream projects that came from a good place. We found the right writer, the perfect actor, the right writer. I was able to just all the experience that I had gained over the years of working with all these fantastic talents, I was able to just plow it into Bob had never done a solo show, so I was able to sort of guide him, and he was so perfect for Eric, and it was a real tribute. We were very wary about playing Eric Morecambe because he's such a favorite, and a one-man show. How do you do a piece about Eric Morecambe without Ernie Wise? And then when it was found out that we were going to depict Ernie Wise as a ventriloquist dummy, a lot of people were really upset about that, the idea of it. And Doreen, Eric's wife, refused to be a part of it. And actually, they wanted to see if they could put an embargo on it, but they couldn't because we were using all original material. But we insisted that this was an absolute heartfelt tribute to Eric and his legacy, and that eventually they would come to see what we were doing. And of course, the reports that were coming out of Edinburgh were so strong that Ronnie Corbett came and absolutely loved it. And he met with Bob and me after the show and said, I'm gonna tell Doreen about this. It's fantastic. It's going to be great, and she'll come round. And of course, we then, same thing happened, same procedure as normal. Came back from Edinburgh, in all the West End producers' offices. Everybody wanted it. I settled on a partnership with this West End outfit, and we set about producing it for Christmas, and it went to the West End. We were hit hard by the snow, but it won the Olivier Award and got a nomination. So that was another sort of threshold, if you like. It was a wonderful thing that we'd created something again for the love of it, and it went down to the West End and was recognized in such a way, and that was a beautiful thing. And so what else? I mean, crikey, Edinburgh's got so many great memories and so many talents. And
do you prefer producing and directing, Guy, or acting, or is it good to have a mix of all three?
I think it's a good thing. It's a bit of a stretch sometimes, and sometimes I find myself doing all of them at the same time in Edinburgh. And I've kind of got it to the point where I know when I need to direct, I know when I need to rehearse my own work, I know when I need to be writing. I kind of know the times in the year when I need to do it so that I can actually achieve all three. So sometimes in a season in Edinburgh, I'll have a big show, I'll have a small show that I've directed, a big show that I've directed, and then I will do a couple of performances. I will rarely, if anything, I mean, in 12 Angry Men year, I did a full run of Under Milk Wood, which I had 45 minutes between the end of 12 Angry Men to run across town and do a full run of Under Milk Wood. It was nuts. I won't do that again. But I've now sort of got that down, so I can. And I've been accused of being an egoist, ego theater. Masterson's name is all plastered all over the place, but it's never intended as that. It's always intended that it's a great project that I want to be involved with and that I can be involved with, and the venue wants it and I can make it work logistically, so why not? It's not that I want to have my name stuck on all over everything, and I think largely that's the way it's been received. But of course, you get a few detractors out there who'll tall poppy syndrome, try to knock you down a few pegs, which is fine, I suppose. But for the most part, I think my intentions have always been positive. I've never really done something for the impact that it might have. I pick my work because I believe it's got something that needs to be there, and I pick the talent because these are people I want to work with that I think excite me, and that need to be there. David Calvito, for God's sake. I mean, he's one of the most sought after people in Edinburgh. Everybody wants him, just because he's so bloody consistently good. God knows why that man is not a global star, but such is life. It's hard.
What was your catalyst? How did you start off acting? What was it that brought it about?
Well, you know the answer to that one. I had a very famous uncle who was a big actor, and he told me that if I wanted to be an actor, he wouldn't help me, which is a really foolish thing to say to someone like me. Anyway, he then went and died in 1984, and I was going out with an actress at the time, and she knew the relationship. The man was Richard Burton, who was quite famous, and it's true that I was when I knew him really well, and I without going into too many details, I got to know him very well in 1981. He came to stay with us in North London, stay with his sister, who was effectively his surrogate mother. Their mother died when he was 2, and so my grandmother took him in and brought him up. So my mother was effectively his sister. All very confusing. Anyway, so he was great Uncle Richard, but I called him Uncle Richard. And he wasn't very well, and he'd bought a Mini Cooper, and he couldn't drive it because he wasn't well, because his neck was it was too vibrational, all that kind of thing. Couldn't drive this Mini Cooper S. So he asked me to, and he needed to get that car to Switzerland, and so he asked me to go to drive it to him with him. And my mother complained that I just passed my test, and Richard said, "It's all right, Marianne, I'm going with him." So I drove Richard Burton to Switzerland in a Mini Cooper S, and all in all, we spent 5 weeks together in London, during the Wimbledon weeks, and then crossing over to Switzerland, and we spent some time in Paris. And during that time, I got to know the real Burton, the man behind the myth. I heard the stories, family stories, Hollywood stories, and I had mentorship from him. He wanted me to finish my degree. I was going through a tough time at university, studying something I wasn't really in love with, and I was coming up to my third year, and I really wanted to drop out, to be honest. And I was a biochemist, for God's sake, doing a joint honors degree in biochemistry and chemistry. I mean, you know, you can look at me and go, what the hell are you doing? And anyway, Uncle Richard was adamant that I should finish my degree. And he said, you're going to finish your degree. You'll finish your degree. Don't even think about acting. And I said, no, it's never even crossed my mind. But of course, he'd engendered it right there and then. He introduced me to Dylan Thomas, for God's sake. Look, I was sitting in his library in July 1981, just before he was flying back to commentate the royal wedding, which was a very funny thing. And he says, listen to this. And he goes, to begin at the beginning, it is spring, moonless night in the small town, starless and Bible black. And he starts to recite Dylan Thomas. And I'm going, oh my God, this is fantastic. And you get Richard Burton giving you a private rendition of Under Milk Wood in his library. It's not going to leave you unscathed, is it? So anyway, I didn't give it another thought. I finished my degree and then ran away to America. I found myself in Hollywood, not because I wanted to be an actor, but because I just was finding my way in life and was in the restaurant business. And one of the people I was working with was an actress. And I told her that I was related to Richard Burton. And then he died in 1984. And she said, well, maybe it's time for you to follow your dream and do it. And I said, how? You know, where do I start? She said, you help me. So she taught me to learn a monologue. And I then went and auditioned for an acting class that she was involved with. And I got in. And I suppose 6 months later, I was playing my first lead role in a musical comedy, which is really ironic because this thing was called The Wonderful World of Waver. And Waver Theatre is kind of like fringe theatre in Los Angeles. And they call it Waver because they waive the rules of equity, which means that professionals can work in 99-seat theatres or less with non-professionals. And the American union rules were very, very strong. So this is what they called it equity waiver, it was called. So we got paid $15 a week because they couldn't be seen to be paying us. $15 a week was boot money, really. And I auditioned I just auditioned and they gave me the lead role. And I played in there for 6 months, got an agent. Next thing I knew, it was up for TV. Various big TVs came along, and I suddenly started working again, lead roles on stage in LA. And then I came up against some problems. I mean, I didn't let anybody know I was related to Burton. I didn't want that knowledge to come out because I didn't want to be compared with him until I felt that I was any good. I still didn't know if I was any good, and I was desperate to be good because that's what you are in Hollywood, desperate and insecure. And but by all intents and purposes, I was playing lead roles and getting fairly good reviews, and seemed to be getting a good response. I mean, I look at some of the work I did and think, crikey, do you really get away with that shit? But there was some work I was pretty proud of, you know. I've got a video recording of myself playing in The Caretaker, and I look at that and go, wow, you weren't bad. But then I think back to when I played Iago in Othello. I thought, oh my God, you were terrible. But I wouldn't hire you. So anyway, but that's how it all started. And then the problems I faced were that it was released in Variety, which is the Hollywood thing, that I was on stage in LA, and I was Burton's nephew. So suddenly the press descended, and my reviews for this particular play were mixed. I was playing a way outlandish character, and some reviews said I was absolutely the funniest thing since sliced bread, and other people said I chewed up the furniture. So it really wasn't the sort of universal thing that I needed when that knowledge was released. And then a couple of things happened in Hollywood where I came up 3 huge projects. One was Lethal Weapon 2 with Mel Gibson, and another one was a Samsung commercial during the 1988 Olympic Games, and I lost out on them. Oh, another thing was moonlighting. I went up for moonlighting. Oh my God! And I went through 7 auditions for moonlighting, including flying me over to New York to meet the producers, to meet everybody, and that's when you learn it's between you and one other person. And I didn't get it. And then LA Law, that was the final straw. They were casting this new show called LA Law, and it was between me and Jimmy Smits, and they gave it to Jimmy Smits. And so I lost a lot of heart, and my agent said, look, if you really want success, go back to London, join the RSC, come back in 5 years' time, having played all these leads in the RSC, as if that was going to happen. I'm home. Now I can play Hamlet for the RSC. Well, let's just say it didn't happen that way. So I sold up everything in LA. Oh, Lethal Weapon 2, hilarious. Got cast. Came back to London for a holiday before 10 weeks of shooting, some of it in Spain. Nice big contract. You know, it wasn't going to be mega bucks, but it was a couple of tens of thousands. And it was a good role, a memorable role, a role that I remember when I saw the actor who did it. And I was cast as Hans. And I was at home watching The Sneeze in, I can't remember the name of the theater, in the Strand Theater with Rowan Atkinson. I'm taking a pee during half time, and this guy turns to me and says, "Guy, what are you doing here?" I'm taking a pee next to the guy from Hollywood who I auditioned with. I said, "Oh, I'm just home before I go out and film Lethal Weapon 2. He said, "Oh, I'm in that too. South African." "Yeah, playing South African." He said, "What part are you playing?" I said, "I'm playing Hans." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "Yeah, I'm playing Hans." He goes, "No, I'm playing Hans." So I ran home. This was in the days before mobile phones. I ran home and I called LA and I said, "What's going on? Guy, where have you been? We've been trying to get in touch with you. We don't have a number." Like, "Oh, well, you know, what's happened?" He says, "You've been written out the film, but we've secured $10,000 for you." So they'd amalgamated 2 parts and given it to him, and I didn't get it. And that broke my heart. But Lethal Weapon, but LA Law was the final straw. And I then came back, and I thought, I'm never going to just walk into the RSC. "Hello, I'm Guy Masterson. I've just played Hamlet in Los Angeles. I'm sure you need me." It didn't happen that way. So I decided I'd go to Lambda. So I went to Lambda for a year. I did the postgraduate course there. And I came out. I was offered the RSC, but I was offered Players Cast, which is, I was advised by my agent not to touch Players Cast. I regret that now, but they said, "No, if you've just done Hamlet and Iago over there, you're not going to the RSC as Players Cast." I was 29 years old, because that's all you'll do. They'll never see you as anything other than Players Cast, which means basically you play what they give you, and you play in multiple small roles. You change costumes numerous times, change wigs, all that stuff. It's hard work, but they'll always see you as a utility actor. So I refused it, turned it down, and I then missed out on, well, I was then cast as Algernon in, Charles in The Importance of Being Earnest, in a world tour of that, and that was put off by the Iraq War, the first Iraq War. I then got cast as Macduff in Macbeth with Francesca Annis and Roy Marsden, and was then uncast by one of the producers who wanted somebody else to play the role. And I was in a British movie, playing a co-star in a British movie, and we filmed the big shoot 'em up scene at the beginning, in the beginning of the shoot, and then they ran out of money and never got finished. And then suddenly I was out of work. I was out of work, unknown, unemployed, on the dole, and I'd just given up what was a pretty damn good career in LA, very close, and couldn't get seen. Nobody wanted to know me. Nobody cared what I'd done in America. And I became depressed. And it was a very dark time. And I then thought, crikey, got to do something. So I did a solo show. And I fell in love with the genre, and that changed my life. I suddenly realized when I was standing up there on stage on my own that the connection that I had with the audience was so powerful, and it just felt, oh, this is what theatre's about. It's not about me showing off, aren't I good? It's about the connection. It's about my ability to storytell, my ability to convey them to a place they otherwise wouldn't go. That's when I learned what it was all about. Nobody had ever told me that. In Hollywood, it's all about you. It's all about your career ladder, the choices you make, and that you don't take jobs that aren't going to advance you. You don't do things for the love, you do it for the money. But finally I learned, oh, this is what Uncle Rich was on about. This is what theatre is. This is what the power of theatre can be. And so that changed my life, changed me as a performer. And it also made me realize that I was doing it right. It made me realize that I had something. I had something that I could grasp, which was an ability to communicate with an audience and to really understand what that communication is. And so I decided that my work would be to focus on that connection, and that everything I did, both as a performer and as a director and as a producer, would focus on that connection. So anybody I work with and all the work that I take on as a producer has to have the ability to engender that connection. I'm not going to do things, wouldn't it be great to do this, can put someone in it, make a lot of money. That is not how I operate. And occasionally there is what seems like a commercial bent to it. I'm not stupid. I know where the commercial, where there's a commercial edge, but it still has to satisfy that criteria. And that's when I did Under Milk Wood. And Under Milk Wood started off as a tribute, a full circle tribute, if you like, to Uncle Richard. I decided to read the whole thing instead of just listen to the opening monologue. And I read the whole thing, thought, this is really good. This is really clever. I think I might learn this and do it as a solo performance. And people went, what? There's 69 characters. Are you nuts? I thought, it'll be fun. So I did it. I did it purely as an experiment. I'd seen Stephen Burkoff play in the West End, and he was amazing. And I thought, my God, look what one person can do on an empty stage. And I want what he has. And so I just decided to do Under Milk Wood and sort of do it sort of in a semi-Burkovian style. Except Stephen is very mannered, and he's very Lecoq trained, mime, all that kind of thing. Mine was much more free flowing. I wanted mine to be my physical expression to be a physical expression of my imagination. I didn't want to sort of apply a mime or physicality to something. I wanted all my physicality and mime to come out of the creation of the character. And so that was my little experiment with Under Milk Wood. And it succeeded. It hit, and it changed again. It changed everything. And so that was my tribute to my wonderful uncle, inspiration and mentor, and Dylan Thomas. And as my wife says, thank God for Dylan Thomas, because it's built this house.
You performed, was it at the weekend? Were you performing there recently?
I did. I performed for the first time since lockdown started on Saturday.
And how was that as an experience?
I'm still recovering. I don't think I've ever gone 9 months without being on stage since I started. And in fact, I know I haven't. There was a period, I think about 6 months, where I was doing a lot of directing, but nothing. And I can't express how exhausted I was. It was like running a marathon and then being run over at the finish line with a steamroller. And it wasn't just, if it would be one performance, it would have been enough, but it was 2 performances, and it was a big house, and my voice was exhausted. I couldn't be amplified because of various technical issues with my sound effects and stuff like that. And so I knew I was going to have to give it some welly. So you know that thing where when you project, the diaphragm is constantly pumping in order to get the voice out. And that actually is a physical thing. That's like pumping iron. And that's 85 minutes for each show. Pump. By the time, and I hadn't eaten, and I'm on this thing called the keto diet where I cut all sugar out, so I couldn't. Stage manager said, "I'll get you some food. What do you want? Do you want some chips? Do you want this?" And I said, "No, get me just pure protein is fine." Came back with 6 drumsticks. I ate 3 drumsticks before the first performance. I have never done a performance on 3 drumsticks, but that's what I did. And by the time I finished, I was absolutely finished. I could barely get out of bed yesterday morning. Wow. But I'm back, and I've got a performance this coming Friday in Bedford, and then one in Oxford on Saturday, or Wallingford to be precise, and then a whole week in Salisbury. By that time, I'll be sort of up to speed, able to run marathons.
And how many were in your audience? What was the audience size?
Well, the first one was just about 100, and the second one was 180. So that was socially distanced down from 800 seats.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm playing a 700 seater next week at Salisbury Playhouse, and we're down to, I think our capacity is 165.
But at least you're back out there. At least people are getting to see stuff.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I said to them, thank you for having the courage to come out tonight, because that's almost as brave for those people to go, I'm going to sit in a darkened room with a bunch of people I don't know, even though we're socially distanced, with this monster lurking in the dark shadows, this COVID monster. So that's one thing. I have to say, though, that the venue was remarkable. I mean, I had my mask on. I didn't get to within 2 meters of a stage manager. It was remarkably done. Although, prior to that, I'd been on a train which had just emptied with 100 people, and no one cleaned that between shows. It's very weird, the whole thing. But anyway, we did it, and theatre's back. Even at that level, it's not affordable. I can't see theatre surviving with these restrictions, and I can't see theatre being broadcast because you're cutting the very essence of the communication of live theatre. Although I can see it as a survival method. I'm being live streamed myself, actually, on the 23rd of December, Christmas Carol, and that's going to go out live that night and then on demand until January 1st. So it'll be very interesting to see how that's, and that's going to be filmed with 4 cameras, so it's going to be quite well produced. But I've always been very skeptical about that, because my whole thing is that live performance is live performance for a reason. That's the magic. It's the community. When you can look an audience member in the eye, I don't mean so that they can receive your spittle, but I do mean that they can look you in the eye and exchange whatever the energy is of communication that you do not get through the camera. And that to me is the one missing ingredient from it, which we have to protect at all costs. And I think if anybody's been in seen a concert, for example, with a live orchestra, and listened to the same orchestra playing the same piece on a CD, it's a very different experience.
And where can people see your stream?
Well, it's going to be broadcast from Lakeside Arts in Nottingham. So I think it's going to be on Vimeo. I don't know, but we'll find out. But as soon as the logistics of it are set, I'll start to put that out there, and I'll send you a link if you like.
Brilliant, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Guy. Much appreciated for giving me your time.
My God, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Mick. We've gone through a lot. The Odd Couple.
Indeed.
Which I loved.
I'm trying to think. I mean, how often are you in Northern Ireland? It's at least every year, near enough, isn't it?
Well, it was. I was going to have a show in Northern Ireland this year called Shaving the Dead by Owen O'Neill, starring Alan McKee and a Welsh boy. Unfortunately, Lyric had to drop that because of COVID.
Yep.
Hopefully, we'll reinstate that brilliant piece by Owen. So yeah, but I've made lots of great friends, and I presented Gordon's piece about that. What's the name of that comedian?
Frank.
Yeah, Frank
Carson, yes.
Yeah. In Edinburgh. So many great friends, and from The Odd Couple and Nuala and everybody. You know, it was memorable, and I miss them all. Yeah. I sound like a sloppy old.
They can all start doing their trade soon, you know.
Yes, they need to get back on. Need to get back on those boards.
Fingers
I
crossed.
think if I hadn't got the Christmas Carol, this wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
I think it had to be something like Christmas Carol for people to come out.
Yeah.
And get live theatre going again. It had to be something of that ilk. Maybe there are a couple of pantos happening, even if it's incredibly socially distanced. I don't know how they can afford it, but
yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting 21 to see. You know, will people want to go out? It'll be interesting, you know.
Well, they are going out. That's the thing. They're quite happy to go to bloody pubs and things like that, aren't they? So, you know, they will go out. They will go out. And I think COVID will, you know, biochemistry side of my head says, but COVID will eventually die away. It will mutate into a non-infectious thing and will be as dangerous as normal flu. But at the moment it isn't, and we've got to deal with it.
So will we see you back in Edinburgh, or has your year out of Edinburgh?
No, I will be back this year. Yeah, the plans are that I'll be back.
Yeah.
And there'll be a couple of Northern Ireland connections with that, I can tell you right now. Yeah, I'll be back. So I appreciate you wanting to find out my take on shit. I've talked a lot. You barely asked a question. See, you pull my string and what happens?
That's the great thing about interviewing actors and writers and performers.